Okay, so this week is called Lacanian Psychoanalysis. Rationality is Real. Let's remember the way that we've been using titles. That subtitle, Rationality is Real, is meant in a negative sense. It's a critique of the nature of rationality. So what does it mean to say for Lacan that rationality is real? Well, let's look into it. This week, we turn our attention to Jacques Lacan, who is a mid-20th century literary theorist, and his version of psychoanalysis called Lacanian psychoanalysis. So one of the reasons why I do this section is because it gives us a chance to go back to a theory that we're already familiar with and to think about that theory in a different way now that we're sensitive to language. So you've got ordinary Freudian psychoanalysis, and then you've got Lacanian psychoanalysis. And putting the two together can help us to see at a glance the difference that it makes to be super sensitive to language. Okay, so this is like an object lesson, if you like, and it's why I spend the extra time on psychoanalysis. I also think that it helps to drive home the critique of the ego that's going on in psychoanalysis. So maybe the most important point, or the most basic point to be made here, is that Lacan likes Freud. So let's get that straight. Let's not make a mistake about that and thinking that Lacan is subverting Freud or secretly poo-poos psychoanalysis. He doesn't. He doesn't. He's fully on board with psychoanalysis. He's an admirer of Freud, but he looks at the Freudian ideas and the Freudian categories through the lens of Saussurean psychoanalysis. So one of the things that he does is he goes back to the idea of the cogito. Again, this is standard for Freud. It's standard for Lacan. And I really like the language of the introduction, Rivkin and Ryan, because, again, they just show how persistent the idea of a stable ego is, especially in psychology amongst those people who disagree with the psychoanalytic version. Or the Freudian and Lacanian psychoanalytic version, for them, they are quite happy to treat the ego as a stable concept. And the way that Rivkin and Ryan talk about this, I think, is very helpful, very instructive. I mean, at the end of the day, you may choose to align yourself with one of the other camps in psychology, but for the purposes of this course and for the purposes of understanding a pretty important thread in literary theory, you really want to at least you want to expose yourself in a deep way to this line of thought. So if language is a signifying chain, and there we see the effect of Saussurean language. If language is a signifying chain, we never arrive at meaning, right? Because words only have meaning in the presence of other words. So there's no core, there's no substance to the idea of meaning in language. And what Lacan does is he says, look, that's the way that these psychoanalytical phenomena operate. We looked at a few: dreams, neuroses, fetishes, right? So that these little, if you take dreams, for instance, a symbol that appears in your dream. I had a nasty dream the other day that I'm not gonna tell you about it, but it had little images in it, and I'm thinking, okay, what does this mean, and how does this mean in connection with the other little bits of my dream, right? So these images, these little clusters of things in our dreams, are like a signifier. Each is like a signifier, and what one little compact bit means only makes sense in the presence of other little compact bits. So the images, symbols of our dreams become signifiers. The language of Saussure is brought to bear. And what this means is that there's no content, there's nothing in us that is producing these effects. To give you an example of a word that Lacan will use is the word rebus. These chains. He calls these chains rebuses, and a rebus. I show it to you in the book. Is a series of pictures that tells you what something is called. And I show you rebuses of Shakespeare's plays. So I encourage you to take a little time and have a little fun with those. And the solution is given right at the end of the chapter. But what happens to desire is a little weirder even than what you get in Freud. So in Freud, the idea is that you have this well deep within you of a sex drive and a death drive, a drive for violence. And the way that the id really is what produces these effects that can only really come out in disguised fashion. They can come out a little bit more freely in dreams. They come out in our neuroses. They come out in our fetishes. But we have this seething realm within us of these desires that produce these effects. With Lacan, it's a little different. I talk about this in the chapter, so I've got a couple examples. I won't repeat them here that I think will help you to understand this. But for Lacan, if the signifiers only have meaning in the context of other signifiers, then it's the signifiers that produce the sense of desire. So there isn't even a well within you that is producing this desire. It is only the effect of there being signifiers in the presence of one another. Hopefully you can catch the sense of what this does is it really hollows out completely what is inside you. There's nothing inside you. A really good story to think about in this regard would be Joseph Conrad's long short story, The Heart of Darkness. Kurtz is a hollow man. So the notion of hollowness is, so I think this is a little scarier even than the idea of the id in Freud. Same ballpark, same sort of set of ideas at stake here, but it's even more sobering. And I think the difference is that, you know, we talk about a bubbling, seething undercurrent with the id. With Lacan, you get the sense of just dryness. There's a hollowness, vacancy, and there's something even more, I think, disturbing about that. When you turn to the Johnson reading, really good contextualization of what Lacan is doing. We come back to that idea of the signifier being more material than the signified. Again, we really want you to be happy with that idea. Before that, she talks about how psychoanalysis and the other literary theories were working in a context where religion and belief in God was being replaced by other things. Broadly speaking, we can call this humanism, though that should be fine-tuned properly, probably, and we can call it, Charles Taylor calls it exclusive humanism. We can call it secular scientific humanism. And if you read Nietzsche, it doesn't come through so much in the reading that we did, though it's already present there. But if you read more of Nietzsche, you realize that Nietzsche is critiquing not only belief systems like Christianity and Platonism, he is also critiquing the Enlightenment project, and he's critiquing confidence in humanism and science. And the reason for this is because he really wants us to embrace our finitude, our situatedness, and the limitations that are placed on us because we are already in language and already in reality. So in the late 19th century, as religion is being replaced, it's being replaced by something that, well, in some quadrants is literature. And literature here would be spelled with a capital L, almost like something we can believe in. In today's society, I would say that the nearest equivalent for this is something like the Olympics, where, at least the way that some people talk about it on the newscasts or the broadcasts of the Olympics is, you know, celebrating the human spirit, celebrating the potentiality, the best of what we are as individuals and as nations coming together, right? It's like a quasi-religion. Well, literary theory is having none of this. Literary theory goes after literature with a capital L. It says, look, this is bullshit. If you think that this has some kind of an overarching universal meaning that can make us feel good about ourselves. And so Barbara Johnson, it happens pretty quickly. It's just a part of a paragraph, but it's a really important move that she makes as she sets up the discussion of writing and the discussion of Lacan. And then she's going to go on to read or discuss Derrida as well, which you can read if you like, but you'll have gotten the sense that I want by the time you finish the Lacan section. Right, so there's that. And then when you turn to Poe's short story, it's the great story, and it is about the shortcomings of a certain view of rationality. So again, rationality is on the table. And one of the questions that we can ask ourselves, and we thought of this when we were doing Freud as well, is, you know, why does a theorist choose a particular story? Well, I think one of the things that we can say is that Lacan is interested in critiquing the notion of rationality. And what he finds is that that critique is already underway. We saw this right at the beginning of the course, that literature itself critiques the idea of rationality. And so when Lacan is looking for a cultural artifact to reinforce his ideas of psychoanalysis, we shouldn't be terribly surprised that he turns to a story like Edgar Allan Poe's The Purloined Letter. It works very well for the theory that he's proposing. Okay, I won't say more. It's all there in the pages of Rationality is the Essence of Literary Theory. I hope you enjoy these readings. And after this, there's only one more theory for us to look at. All right, I'll leave you to it. Bye for now.